What's up, church family? Welcome to this week's episode of D.T.S. Before we get into the fire sermon, I'm going to introduce my guests, who are just full of the joy of the Lord.
And giggles today.
Yeah, I got a question for y'all.
All
So,
right.
say your name, then answer the question. What was your childhood dream job?
Okay, I'm Cammie, and I wanted to be a vet or a firefighter for like the longest time.
Ooh, I could see that. No,
Yeah.
I could see the firefighter.
That's still a dream.
I could see a vet, for sure.
Yeah. We'll see.
No, I feel like Cammie would get in the fires, though.
Word.
Like, Cammie will just, go for it.
Coming for your flames.
Yeah, she'll just, I could just see you carrying people out, you know?
I am Amy, and I wanted to be a nurse or like a singer-songwriter, play piano.
Oh,
and I
really?
never sang, so I don't know where that came from, but I think I also wanted to be a cook or a chef, whatever.
I'm Brenda, and I wanted to be a lot of things. I think the two main things were either architect or interior designer, or being a producer for TV. I was always interested in filming. I wanted to go to college to make movies and stuff, and I was just super creative. So I either wanted to create houses, or I wanted to create productions. That's always what I wanted to do. So this Sunday, we're continuing our series on Red Sea Revelations. We're on part 5, and the sermon title was Give God Room. The main gist of it was, when faced with problems we can't control, we become afraid, anxious, and nervous. We want to change something, fix something. We want to be anywhere other than where we are. But not once does the Bible say, worry about it, stress over it, or figure it out. But over and over, it clearly says, trust God and give God room, period. So what stood out to you?
What stood out to me was when Don mentioned that when we worry, it's based on what we want. And I think that it's because I've been in that place before, worrying over what I wanted rather than what I knew that I needed.
Yeah.
And so that just kind of stood out to me.
Yeah, mine's kind of like that. But when we worry, we're focused more on our capabilities and more on the Lord's, and so that's just kind of showing our self-centeredness.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that was convicting for sure. But I was also thinking you can't focus on two things at once. So if I'm focused on my capabilities, then obviously I'm going to be led astray. And so it's just so important to be intentionally focusing on the Lord and what He can do rather than what I can do. Because I'm not going to be able to dig myself out of a trench or a whatever, a rut, as we were talking about, by my own strength. I have to look to the Lord.
Yeah, that's so good. I was thinking about that too, just how when we're worried, we're just being self-centered most of the time, where we're just thinking about how something is affecting you, what you're going to get out of something, your benefit, when really, God's plan, He isn't always concerned with your comfort or what you want. Sometimes God's plan and His purpose, goes against what you want. And so this made me tell myself, see more than yourself. You're just a little piece of God's huge puzzle that He's God has a bigger story than just our world. We're so caught up in our world, but we're really just a small piece of God's world, where He's doing something outside of us, outside of our we're here on this earth, but it's not about us.
Yeah.
And so when we're worried, we're just thinking about what's happening in our world, when really tragedies happen, people will die, people will get sick, but God can use something so tragic for His greater purposes. And so we don't always think about, okay, God works all things together for the good of those who love Him. That's the good, bad, and the ugly. I think of Joseph, the enemy meant to harm me with this, but God meant it for good. And so I think just always having a bigger perspective on our lives. And again, with worry, what stood out to me was that worry is the reverse of faith. That idea, because I went through a season of anxiety, and it was really bad. And I remember in that time, I felt so distant from God. I just remember I was struggling every day, and I was still reading every day, praying every day, crying out to God every day, but somehow it was I felt like I was reaching for Him, but just somehow missing Him. And I was just so frustrated, because I'm God, why am I trying and still like I don't feel close to you as I used to or close to you as I'd like to. But I realized that I was so anxious, like I was so worried that all my anxiety was me not fully trusting God, and me not trusting God fully in my circumstances was hindering me from being close to Him. And so what we were saying, like if worry is the opposite of faith, it must be sin, because like anything that's not of faith at all is sin. And so if I'm living in anxiety, living in constant worry, I'm living in sin. And if I'm living in sin, I'm not as close to God as I should be or want to be. Yeah. And so that was like a huge revelation for me, like questions I had 2 years ago of like, why am I not feeling you, God? Why am I feeling like this disconnect between me and God? But I was not trusting in him fully and just constantly in a state of worry and anxiety. Yeah. So that just blew my mind.
It's easy when we feel distant from God to think that it's his fault and like, God, like, why are you not near, blah blah. And it's like, well, like, let's take a look at yourself. What have you done? Or like, what was the last thing God told you to do but you were disobedient? Or like that kind of thing. And just like a self-check with that.
I know. And it's crazy how like I didn't have this realization until almost over 2 years later, or 3 years.
Yeah.
And so I tried to find the answer for so long, but God didn't fully give it to me until this past Sunday.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
The scripture we're going out of for this sermon was Exodus 14:13 through 14. And it says, "And Moses said to the people, 'Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent.'"
Our first point was worrying blinds us to the one person who can fix the problem. Worry is the reverse of faith. It doesn't fix anything. Worry blinds you to the one who can fix what is wrong. Worry is often based on wanting what we want. Why shouldn't we be anxious about anything? Because the Lord is near. He will never leave us nor forsake us. Though you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we won't have to be anxious or fearful, because he is right there with us. All we need to do is realize that he is there and he's not going anywhere. So the first question is, were you ever worried to the point where you weren't trusting God?
For me, it was my health and my anxiety. I had so much anxiety over my appearance and how people saw me that I tried to do literally everything I could to be perfect, or at least like reach the standard of perfection in my head, which eventually led me to having an eating disorder. And I was so anxious about, like I was saying, my appearance, how people saw me, that instead of trusting God, I tried to put matters into my own hands and tried to control and manipulate my body and everything surrounding food and working out, to the point where my health actually decreased and it was worse than it was before. Like I was damaging my health, and I thought I was okay like that when I would feel God telling me to like let go and just trust him with like my body, my health, my appearance. But it got to the point where the heavy like anxiety led to the eating disorder, and I was just so paralyzed in it that I didn't know how to get out of it for so long, because it was just cycles in my head, like we were talking about, like the ruts. Like I just couldn't get out of it mentally. And I just realized that I was so anxious about it that I wasn't trusting God and trying to put matters into my own hands, and it did not work out for me.
That's kind of how it was too for me with like anxiety and everything. And when I was growing up, I was super shy, and I like started to see that I was like just more very anxious about a lot of things that I didn't need to be anxious about. And especially in social settings, I had so much social anxiety, and I would just like sit there and just like I didn't want to talk, because it like I just feeling like no matter who I'm talking to or whatever I say, I'm just gonna be like, I don't know, it just made me uncomfortable for some reason. And so I was just crippled by it like 24/7, and so I was putting more trust in myself, kind of like you were saying, than I was in God. And I was also putting more faith in what others thought about me than I was putting faith in what God thought about me. And so I was definitely not trusting in the Lord as much as I should have been.
That's really good. I was kind of thinking about that too. Like, I was so anxious about my future more, like, so I was making all these plans, the ones that I would want to do or what I would feel more comfortable with. But then like the beginning of this year, God spoke to me and was like, no, like you're going to face it. You're going to go and do what I've called you to do.
So that leads us into point 2. God will use your story for his glory. Only God could turn a mess into a message, a test into a testimony, a trial into a triumph, and a victim into a victory. You might not like where you are right now. You might feel like where you are is the end of everything you have dreamed about, but if you give God room, not only is he going to deliver you for his glory, but he is going to use your story to speak to those who come behind you. So that leads us into discussion question 2. How has God used your story for his glory?
I guess, like, kind of following what I was saying about, like, the first question, because I kind of ended on a sad note. There's a happy ending, I promise. With eating disorders, I struggled for a little over 2 years with it, and I got so discouraged, like, just thinking, oh, how could I fall into this, you know? Because I used to be so judgmental of people who had eating disorders. Like, I was never going to go through it, and it was just ironic that I, in a way, became the same people that I was judging. And so, for one, God exposed to me that, like, hey, you're lost too. Like, you're broken too. Like, just because you didn't damage your health with drugs or sex or alcohol, like, doesn't mean you didn't damage your body in other ways. And that was just, it made me more, like, sympathetic, and made me see others more lovingly instead of judgingly, being like, hey, I've been there. And with that being said, last summer, God kind of gave me a green light just to be, like, more open about it. And I started doing internship last year, and I was just able to open up to so many other girls about it, and just realizing, like, oh, it's not just me, like, it's so many other people. And at that point, I was more on the other side of it already, and so just being on the other side of it and getting to, like, encourage other girls, connect with other girls, relate to other girls, be like, hey, like, I'm here for you. I obviously don't judge you because I've been there, like, I've been through, I know what it feels like. That was just a huge, like, testimony for me, being like, okay, God had a good purpose in that, and my story's being used for his glory because it's encouraging other people. And I think God uses our stories to, not just for our own character, because it did help my character just in the ways I would judge people, but also to reach other people.
For me, I think along the lines of being in past relationships, like all the brokenness and all the heartbreak that I went through, like having put myself in those situations, and kind of like what you were saying, like when I was younger, I would judge, or not like judge, but look at girls and be like, why would you put yourself in that situation, you know? And then, like, I found myself in the same situations, and then, but God delivered me from that, and so now it's all good. But I think he uses that because now I can see those girls and be kind of encouraging, you know, and like that they're not alone.
Yeah. It's cool because you two are both saying your story was used to impact other girls, and that's same for me. I get to use that to empathize with other girls because it's easy to see your sin or your struggle, and Satan takes it and makes you feel so alone in it, and then you don't want to talk about it or anything. But it's like once you talk about it, it's like the vulnerability in others opens up, and it's like, oh, so many other people were struggling with this, and I had no idea. And so just getting to talk to other girls about it, and then also I got to talk about it on my outreach in Tanzania and just preach about it and show them, like, hey, I'm up here despite anxiety or anything, and if I can do it, like, God can use you too. It's super cool to see how God uses us to impact other people. Even when it's painful at the time.
It's funny how the devil will, like, make us feel so bad about what we've been through, what we're doing. He'll like tempt us, and
then when we fall for it, then he'll make us feel bad about it.
Bait us
it's like he'll bait us into our sin or our struggle or whatever, and then once we fall into it, he's the first one to make us feel ashamed about it. But once we decide to open up and give God room to use our story, then that's when open doors come up to reach others. And so it's a beautiful thing. I think we just gotta take the step and just be real and just be vulnerable with people about what we've been through, because just sharing our stories can bring others to God, which is super cool. So that brings us to our call to action, which is the sermon title, Give God Room. What does that look like practically? Wait on him. Be patient and trust that His timing and His plans are better than yours. Ask God to renew your heart and renew your perspective on your situation. See more than just yourself or what you want. It's not always about you, but it's about His glory. I'd also encourage you to maybe take a break to fast from the things that are distracting you or weighing you down so that God has more space to speak to you, because sometimes the best way we could give God room is by removing something that is either taking His rightful place or just things that are distracting us from what He's saying and what He's doing in our lives. So yeah, we just encourage you to give God room, whether that looks like just trying to trust Him more, trying to meditate on His word more, trying to have faith for more, or if that looks like removing something from your life, just give Him room. That's it. So I'll pray us out. Lord, thank you for this day, and thank you for this time together, God, just to talk about what you're doing in our lives. Lord, thank you for turning our trials, God, into triumph. Thank you for turning our messes into your message, God. Thank you for using our story for your glory, God. We just give you all the praise and the honor, God. You're the only one that can turn things around in our lives, God, and I pray that if you would do it for us, you can do it for others, God. And I pray that you continue to use your word to bring us closer to you, to increase our faith and our trust in you more, and that we can continue to wait on you and have faith in you and give you more space to move and to speak in our lives, God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
That's all we have for this week's episode of D.T.S. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, do all the things, get this word out there, and have a blessed week.